the 50th season of the Swinging A's, the team that has changed baseball with the growth of facial hair. Hi, everyone. This is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. I'd like to have a shout out to Howard Fredericks, who actually is the inspiration behind this particular show, and it's on everything facial hair or growth. And with that, I'd like to point out my cartoon of the week, and that is as the NHL starts. It is also the annual playoff beard. And with that, 6 games, 5 games. Happens every playoffs. They brawl over who grows a beard the fastest. And of course, the NHL has really adopted that for 40 plus seasons. And maybe you could say that it is a result of a Charlie Finley, the old owner of the Oakland A's, a marketing scheme by him that has really turned baseball on its ear in terms of facial hair and the growth of hair. And that's why Howard and I were talking, actually emailing me back and forth this past week, because we were talking specifically about the great Oscar Gamble haircut, or the fro that he used to wear in Major League Baseball after 1972, and the Swinging A's, all or most of the players given money as a bonus to grow either a beard, a mustache, or mutton chops. And we'll get into Raleigh fingers too as well. But it really did change the course of baseball and of all sports, because I don't think there's a team now that doesn't allow some sort of facial hair. I know the Yankees allow mustaches, but obviously they have to cut the hair a certain length. At the time, that 72 series, we can talk about that as well. It was kind of the conservative Cincinnati Reds against the Swinging A's, and it was a pretty good series. 7 games, of course. The A's would dominate the American League in that early part of the 70s, particularly the American League West, winning not 1, not 2, but 3 World Series in a row, and really never got the acclaim that I really think they should have. They had 3 Hall of Fame players on that team, a couple others who were very good. Of course, you had Catfish Hunter, and you had Raleigh Fingers, and you had Reggie Jackson. You had some really good players on that team, and of course, a Hall of Fame manager in Dick Williams, at least in the 72 season and 73 season. And of course, then he was rumored to go to the Yankees, and Charlie O. Finley has a big problem with him, kind of fires him. He quits. It was a whole soap opera of things. You know, the Yankees didn't have the copyright on soap operas like the A's did in the early 70s. And it just seems to be that, well, both teams had one thing in common. It was called Reggie Jackson. Although the A's or the Yankees do pick up Ken Holtzman later on too, although he was not a problem child that Reggie was. But I wanted to talk about this because Howard really got me going on this whole thing with the hair, and it makes for an interesting development in baseball history. And I have plenty of pictures today, all baseball cards and pictures, so I hope you enjoy them as well. And that is this. I did realize this, and I want to save the other one for last. So I'm going to fold this as I talk to you. And of course, as I always state, thank you everyone for having me in your homes each week, invading your space, usually on a Monday evening. As I often and will constantly state, I see this as a chance to just talk everything sports, and whatever comes out of my head or mouth might be different from the theme I had, but it's all because I think when you do talk sports, things occur, or you have remembrances and you bring them back in. And I just think it makes the conversation when you're having with your buddies after a softball game, I just think it adds to the whole experience. But with that, here's Reggie, 1972. Now, what made this card unique, and I'm not sure among collectors if it is particularly expensive to own or purchase, but it is the first time in decades that a baseball player actually had facial hair as part of his Topps baseball card. Now, on doing further review, I found out that wasn't true. That in 1970, in the winter of 1970, one of my favorite players goes from the Cardinals to the Dodgers, plays only 1 year with LA, hits I think 23 home runs for the Dodgers. Guy by the name of, and he's one of my guys who I always thought should be in the Hall of Fame. He is Gary Sheffield once, and or Gary Sheffield is Richie Allen squared. Richie Allen in this 1971 picture actually is sporting a mustache, facial hair. However, everyone attributes Reggie to doing it. Regardless, these two cards were the first time in eons that baseball players were pictured on a Topps baseball card or a collector's card with facial hair. Now, it doesn't seem like a big deal today, especially when you have the different hairdos of so many of the players today. And I'm speaking of, well, just a couple of years back, and he has since shaved it. But we all know the guy who's won the Cy Young Award for the Mets, Jacob deGrom, had quite a bit of hair there. Never facial, but he does grow his hair, quite sporting real long locks there in this Topps baseball card. But what I was finding out was this. When I was doing the research, and actually I went to a really good site. I don't know exactly the website thing. It's basically, you can just go to the Hall of Fame, maybe .org, and they have all these interesting stories from on just a myriad of issues and events and just histories. But I found out going through it that these players were the last to sport facial hair. One was by the name of Wally Shang, and I did find a baseball card of him. This is the beauty of, without a doubt, this is the beauty of the computer and the fact that, yeah, you have a set of encyclopedias in your home, but there's nothing like having this internet service just at your fingertips, literally and figuratively, that you can just put in just a name, or even I can just butcher a name and somehow that name appears on Baseball Reference. But this was the old crackerjack one, as I'm looking at it again, of Wally Shang. He was a catcher. He actually was a switch hitting catcher, and he finishes with a 47.9 WAR. Doesn't make, obviously, the Hall of Fame, but not bad. He played 19 years in the major leagues for a number of teams, including the Athletics, Philadelphia Athletics, the Boston Red Sox, the Yankees. In fact, I do believe he plays for some of their World Series team. St. Louis Browns, goes back to Philly, and ends his career with Detroit at the age of 41. He actually was not a bad player. Probably what hurt him, well, helps him, hurts him, depending. He was 5 times an MVP choice. In fact, he finished 8, 10, 13, 11, and 18. In fact, with Philadelphia, he had 3 homers and 30 RBIs with a 266 batting average as their catcher, and finished 8th in 1913 in the MVP voting. Perhaps his best year in the majors was the year that 1922. He only had 1 homer, 52 RBIs. He had 12 steals and 21 doubles, and he hit .319 and finished. He actually played 124 games for that 22 team. George Sisler was the MVP that year. And ready for this? Wally Shang finished higher than any other Yankee. Bullet Joe Bush, also, who was 26-7, finished 4th. But any Yankee, quote unquote, regular, he finished higher than Bob Musial, Everett Scott, and that was the year I believe Ruth had the bellyache, but the Yankees that year, it was pretty incredible. And Shang was a member. Now, why I bring up Shang, he apparently was the last player to sport, I do believe, a mustache on a playing card or on a collector's card. I just couldn't find it. I looked all over the place for it, and I couldn't come up with it, but I did want to show you a picture of it. The Yankees in 22, of course, lost to the Giants, quote unquote, in 5 games. They got swept, and there was a series tie that year. And of course, Ruth only played 110 games that year. Remember, he had the big bellyache. It's amazing. Just as I'm talking and looking at this, Ruth played 110 games, 35 homers, 96 RBIs, 315, and doesn't sniff the MVP. And I really believe this, even though he had a 6.3 WAR, which was only second to Bob Chalky's 6.9. Chalky, of course, was a pitcher, and he won 20 games that year with a 2.91 ERA. But can you imagine that Wally Pitt played first base, Ruth with those gargantuan home runs, all right, 35.96, which was, any way you look at it, was double the amount of any other player on his team, Bob Musial, 16.88, and he hit 3.19. And Musial that year, ready for this, Bullet Joe Bush had a 5 WAR. Now, listen, I've talked about WAR before. Still don't understand all the intricacies. I would love to take maybe one show and discuss WAR. It has its place. Sometimes, though, it has, and I've talked about this before, particularly with a guy like Ernie Banks, how a guy with 23 home runs in 1969 playing every day for the Cubbies had a negative WAR. That is just unbelievable, and he's a Hall of Famer. But Joe Bush, who finishes 4th in MVP that year, had a 5 WAR, and Ruth had the 6.3. Ready for this? Wally Shang had a 4.2 WAR and finished at least in the running for the MVP. Nobody else really. Bob Musial, who finished 4th, had a 3.2. Basically, Ruth doubled him in the WAR, and yet Ruth got nothing. And it goes back to what I was saying. I think probably the writers were probably upset that Ruth had the bellyache that year, and it caused all kinds of angst with the writers because now they don't really have too much to report on. Ruth, of course, both an entertainer on and off the field. Maybe it was, hey, babe, grow up, do what you're supposed to do, get in shape, and you'll come back and be our favorite player and our MVP the following year. Just to give you an idea, Ruth in 1923, it's amazing. He went from scoring 9, put it this way, any major leaguer, even Hall of Famers, even Musial, Aaron, Mays would say, listen, 110 games, you're going to hit 24 doubles, 35 homers, 96 RBIs, and score 94 runs and hit 315. How many major league players would sign up for that now and take that kind of season every year for 10 years? Everyone would say yes, yes, yes. But for Ruth, ready for this? It was the worst season he had until 1925. Wait a minute. I think it was the 25 season he has the bellyache, but in 22, he had to be injured. I'll have to look into it. But he only played 110 games and has a bad year and goes 35 and 96. In 1925, pardon me, he goes 25 and 67. But those 2 years, ready for this, are the only years from 1919 until 1933 that Ruth had under 100 RBIs in the year. It was the only 2 seasons in which he hit under 40 home runs, with the exception of 1919 when he had 29. So those are the only 2 years that he hit under 40 home runs in the run. They're terrible years, and yet every major leaguer today and in the past 50 years would sign up for that 1922 season. Just to give you an idea, the following year, Ruth goes 41, 130, and hits 393 and becomes the MVP. And just incredible. Incredible. Anyway, Wally Shang is on actually that World Series team. A really good player. Probably one of those guys that you need on a team for depth. Really adds a certain element and chemistry to winning. But the other guy that I was talking about, and he was actually, I think the story is this, and I'll read it to you. Frenchie Bordigare. All right, from the look of him, and here he is. Kind of looks like a Hollywood starlet in a way, or a Hollywood hero. Kind of like a Clark Gable type of figure. From the look of him and the quality of the photo, you might think that Frenchie played back in the 1890s when mustaches were common among major leaguers, but that was not the case. He played from 1934 until 1945, and he was one of the only players from the era to sport a stash. And man, it was a good one. The only problem is I don't have a baseball card with him, but I do have his stats. He played for the Brooklyn Dodgers for a while there. He played for the Yankees, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and the White Sox. He did not have as good a career as, of course, Wally Shang. I'll show him again. I love how he's kind of like doing that snidely whiplash with his mustachio. And immediately when I saw his mustache, I thought of one other guy from the A's. And we'll get back to the A's in a second. But probably his best season was 1936 with the Dodgers. He had 4 homers, 31 RBIs, and a .315 batting average. And finished his major league career with 14 total home runs, 270 RBIs. Played 11 years in the major leagues. And I do believe that the year that he played for the Yankees, 31, he was on that World Series team and he beat his former Brooklyn Dodgers foes. They won that 4 out of 5. That was Brooklyn's first pennant since like the 1920s. And fortunately, he was lucky because he was with Brooklyn in 35 and 36. This is Frenchie. Then goes to St. Louis for a couple of years and Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, he actually played on Cincinnati's World Series team that got swept by the Yankees. But apparently the Yankees saw something in him and they brought him to the Yankees. And then they dump him off on Brooklyn, where he ends his career with the Dodgers. That year, probably his high game was with the Dodgers. He had 125 games, like I said, was really just a backup catcher. But at least he got to 2 World Series and won one of them. I'll take that. Most players would. Frenchie Bordigay, Gary. One of the other guys that sports a mustache. Then it disappears. It becomes part of the culture of baseball, probably the unwritten rule that everyone would be clean shaven until, of course, Reggie appears in 1972, and, of course, Richie Allen. And I don't know why Allen doesn't get more credit. I guess, I got to be honest with you can see the mustache, but Reggie is really up in your face, while this is kind of distant. And perhaps it's this too. This one probably gets more recognition as the guy who breaks, let's say, the mustache barrier, because the A's go on that 3-year World Series run, a number of division titles, and Reggie is behind all of that. That all occurred over this. I was doing the research on it. By the way, Reggie comes up in 1967. Oh, here's Frenchie again. I just want to show you this. It's kind of cool. And of course, there's Frenchie again. And he even has a little, I don't know what you would call facial hair underneath his lower lip there. Kind of cool, but he definitely looks like, I don't know, a Batman villain with that mustache. And of course, him going like this adds to that snidely whiplash kind of look. But those are the last two guys until Reggie and Richie Allen, aka Dick Allen, posed for the Topps baseball cards with mustaches. And like I said, baseball collectors and all the rest of it attribute that 71 card, or this is 1972, as the one that kind of breaks the facial hair barrier. And the reason I bring up Reggie is this. Reggie, of course, comes up in 67 with the old Kansas City Athletics before they moved in 68 to Oakland. And he had pretty good minor league season that year and was brought up. So then I looked and I said, I got to find out who Reggie's first home run was against. Don't even start, because I wasn't even thinking here. I can't remember who he hit his 600th or who he hit his last home run. I was more concerned with, I was just curious to see who he hit his first home run. And I was kind of disappointed because knowing Reggie, as we all do, I figured that his first home run would probably come in his first game, or would come against a Hall of Fame pitcher, or maybe be a game-winning home run. It doesn't. It actually comes against pitcher Jim Weaver of the California Angels. Here's a guy who played 2 years and had gotten a 3 WAR. And as I remarked here, Jim Weaver was only in 30 games, had a half WAR in 30 games. Pardon me, not a 3 WAR, and he had a 3-1 career record, but only played 2 seasons in the major leagues. And it wasn't like he had terrible ERAs. They were under 3.5. In fact, I think his second year was under 3, and yet he never came back. I didn't do any further study because I was really engrossed in getting these great pictures of the mustachio guys. But I was really peaked, and I'll get some more information next week, how this guy kind of didn't survive after those 2 years. And it wasn't like he was bombed with just terrible outings where they said, he's just a career triple, minor leaguer AAA player. He actually did some good things in those 2 seasons with the California Angels. I will tell you this, and this goes back. I do love that California Angel hat. I like the C&A, and I do love when they used to put the halo on the top. It was just unique. Not the greatest, maybe not a Yankee or St. Louis or the wishbone for the Cincinnati Reds, which I like, but this is in its own way unique and kind of cool as well. And goes into what we've been talking about too. I'd love to do a kind of a poll of the best hats. I've done the best uniforms, so I'd like to do the best caps. The thing is, they keep constantly changing the caps, colors, and everything else that you're never sure. I mean, yesterday, in honor of the military, it was great. Every team had camouflage hats. Do like them. I think it works best with San Diego simply because they have brown in their uniform. And really, they're the first ones who came up with the whole idea of the camo uniform. And they do look good when they do it on Sundays. That being said, Reggie, forgot one guy. You had Rolly, Catfish, Reggie. Yeah, I did say Rolly Fingers as a Hall of Famer on those 70 teams. And then you had cusp players. I've often maintained, had Vida maybe he had some off years there and maybe gotten off that A's team after everyone was traded. I'm talking about 79, 80 and stuff. Had he wound up with a more competitive team, you might be talking about Vida Blue as a Hall of Fame pitcher. As it was, he won over 200 games. I think he had 3 20-game winning seasons. Made a number of All-Star teams, of course. Was an MVP and Cy Young in the same year as a pitcher in 1971. Without a doubt, his finest season. Then kind of comes back and is never the same. 72 and 73 kind of struggles with Oakland. But Oakland had, pretty amazing, 3 Hall of Fame players on those 70 teams. And of course, how could I do anything without mentioning Wally Fingers and the handlebar mustache? I mean, it's amazing, really, when you think about it. Here's Frenchie. It's not Hal Habrowski. We'll get to him in a second. They kind of look alike, don't they? And here, Raleigh Fingers is pre-handlebar mustache. This is a 1970 baseball card. I know that because I had it. And this is when he was with the Brewers, I guess 1982, 83. I can't remember when Fleers reinstituted their sets. But that is a beautiful, I wouldn't want a handlebar mustache. I don't think I could grow one. It is kind of cool, though. Barbershop. He looks quartet looking. But here was an interesting thing. Going back this article, I was reading about Raleigh Fingers, and he really did a nice job growing his mustache. And what happened was this quick story. Finley wants to come up with a new marketing idea, and he decides that he's going to pay his players. Reggie comes in and sports that mustache, and apparently he used to do that every spring training and then shave it off. But this particular year, I think he was determined to keep it and maybe, I don't know, send a message. And Finley picked up on the message and decided, you know what, I'm going to pay the players, and it's going to be a great marketing thing. And he said, by the time you all grow them, he says, I'll pay you like $200, $250, depending on how it looks and how much growth there is. And he actually made Father's Day 1972. The article stressed that it was on June 18th, 1972. He made Father's Day into, I guess, let's say Mustache Day or Facial Hair Day. And many of the players by that time on that Oakland A team had facial hair or grew their hair out. I remember Dave Duncan, outstanding pitching coach for Tony La Russa, had a long lock of blonde hair. And he had what I would say is a grizzled blonde beard, but he wore it. Mike Hegan, who came from Washington in a trade in 72, he sported both a beard and a mustache. I think he shaved off the beard. You had Dick Green. Bert Campaneris, I think, was the only guy that I recall who didn't have any facial hair. Bando grows a mustache. Rudy grows a mustache. And like Duncan has the long locks of hair. Billy North, who was on the team later on, although in 72, playing the outfield was like Angel Manguel. I know that they all grew a beard. And then in right, you had Reggie. And, of course, you have Catfish Hunter, who had a real walrus-looking mustache. Kenny Holtzman. All the guys grew it. Even their manager, Dick Williams, grew his own mustache. Guess he wanted to get in on it. And with that, it kind of carried because when they acquired, and I'm going to give you some of the guys from the A's. Let's go to this right now. Here are just some of the A's. Now, Billy North wasn't on that 72 team, or he might have been. And I'm just going to take a look. Billy North comes, I do believe he came in the Rick Monday deal that sent Rick Monday, one of my favorite players later on. Yeah. He is on Chicago in 72 and in 71. I have to look. I'm hoping that. And then he goes 73. He goes to Oakland and immediately grows the beard and all the rest of it. I have to check to see if Oakland in 72 had Rick Monday on that team. But Bert Campaneris, as I do recall, never grew a beard. They had Angel Manguel in right field. Reggie played center, and Bando played left field. So they had traded Rick Monday to the Cubs. Yeah, that's how they got Kenny Holtzman. But all these players, even though the 72 Baseball Reference has them all clean shaven with the exception of Raleigh Fingers and Catfish, even Reggie is not even sporting facial hair. But that 72 team, everybody, I mean, even Darryl Knowles, who kind of looks like a combination, if you can see him there, kind of a combination of Catfish and Raleigh Fingers. And, of course, that's Reggie again in action. There's Billy North. Over here is, of course, Phil Gardner, who sports it. Now, the reason I bring up Phil Gardner is that the only other team that sported as much facial hair that I recall was Phil Gardner and the 79 We Are Family Pirates. That 79 team also sported And I'm going to get to that. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten Oscar Gamble just yet, or Al Habrowski. Here are the Oakland A's, and of course, their team picture is kind of cool. I kind of like it because you have all the different uniforms. That was the other thing that the A's started doing. They had mixing and matching. It is amazing how they mixed and matched in the early 70s, and the Pirates did it in the late 70s and the commonality was the use of yellow or gold. Okay. But you can tell I counted about 15 guys sporting some sort of facial hair. Here are the 79 world champion Pirates. Okay. And you can see the number of guys with beards or mustaches. And down here is Phil Gardner. He is the third guy right here. Okay. He had that thick walrus mustache. And of course, he brought that over along with Chuck Tanner to the Pirates when he gets traded. Just because to show you, sometimes even a trade. Here is what happened. Billy Williams starts to sport a mustache. And the interesting thing is, Williams is traded to the A's in his final season in the major leagues and actually plays in a postseason series as the A's are beaten by the Red Sox in '75. Williams came over strictly as a DH, but he sported the mustache. And of course, Reggie grew the mustache into the beard, which I always liked. And even Ray Fossey, a guy who had a promising career, kind of wrecked by the All-Star game. I often wonder, though, if he had to do it all over again, and this is what I always ask, would you have taken Ray Fossey's career, winner of a couple of World Series and a home run in the World Series, or would you have taken Ernie Banks' career? Hall of Famer, great all-time player. He's up there, top 100 maybe players of all time, maybe top 150. But would you have taken this player's career, kind of a journeyman, good player, potentially would have been a perennial all-star had he not gotten hurt in the 70 all-star game? The problem with that 70 all-star game, Cleveland never found the problem with him, even though he complained about the shoulder injury. And he does make his next, the all-star team the next year, 71. But they really never fixed it, unfortunately. And then, of course, Fossey is traded. Brilliant. One thing you can say about Charlie Finley, his teams were deep. And they always talk about how he could spot talent. You know, he built that A's team in the early 70s. Monday, Jackson, and Bando. He had as free agent or drafted them, acquired Holtzman, signed also Catfish Hunter. He gets Holtzman, and then he builds an extremely deep bench, basically taking a lot of refugee players from the Washington Senators, Epstein, Darrell Knowles, and a couple others. So he did an unbelievable job. Now, Ray Fossey, of course, I was looking this up the other day. Yes, he doesn't have the Hall of Fame career, but he does win 2 World Series, and he does hit a home run, which is his, I think it was his only hit in the 74 World Series. And with this, I even looked that up. He hit it in the last game, Game 5. He hit it off Don Sutton, Hall of Fame pitcher. Not too bad. I think I wouldn't mind taking Ray Fossey's career, despite all the big injury that really knocked him out. Another player that we always associate with the crazy hair, wait a minute, I'm saving the Oscar Gamble, don't worry, he was called the Mad Hungarian, Al Habrowski. I couldn't believe when I saw this, when I was doing his little stats with Baseball Reference, I couldn't believe that he was up in 1970 with the Cardinals. Of course, I have this one. That is him with the Atlanta Braves. Here's Habrowski. Early picture. I think this might be 73 right over here. I think this is 73. And then this is later on. This might be 75. But you can see, even the Cardinals, which were seen as a conservative team like the Cincinnati Reds, And of course, the Reds, I think, were the last of the teams to even allow mustaches. But Habrowski went, and he had some. When you see him, he was kind of a scary dude in baseball, and he had two really good seasons. But I couldn't believe he came up at the age of 20. And the funny thing is, he's got a 646 winning percentage lifetime and 97 saves. And I don't know why he just all of a sudden was out of the game. His best year, of course, was 1975. He was 13-3, led the league in winning percentage, 813, and he had 22 saves in 97 innings. During that run with the Cardinals, because I do remember his biggest moment probably in baseball history with the Cardinals was a Monday night affair in late July, probably early August, where he came in with the bases loaded against the Reds. I remember this because the Reds were clinging maybe to getting one more divisional title. And of course, they had acquired Seaver that year. And I remember him coming into a game. It was 9-8, I believe, St. Louis, bases loaded, nobody out. And I believe he got Foster, Dan Dreesen, and Johnny Bench. And I think he struck out the side. And of course, that really led to his legendary Mad Hungarian. Of course, he had a ritual on the mound. Pretty much either after each batter, he would kind of psych himself up on the back end of the mound and, knock the ball into his glove and come back. And of course, he had a crazy look in his eyes. And with that mutton chop mustache and long and thick, and he had these eyes that were just soul piercing, and he was kind of crazy looking. He did, for those couple of years, really did cause a scare in batters. He went actually on to Kansas City after St. Louis traded him. Never got into a World Series, and of course ended his career at age 32. 13 years in the major leagues. And like I said, he was 64-35. Even if you took out his 13-3 record, he's still 51-32 lifetime. All right. Not a 646 winning percentage, but definitely in the high 58%, 585, 586%. And he had a pretty good ERA, 310. He had a low of 1.66. But put it this way, from 73 to 76, the interesting thing is in 1977, when he had that glory moment against the Reds, his ERA was 4.38 and he only had 10 saves. So he kind of struggled in 77. But basically this, 73, 74, 75, and 76, his ERA was 3.30 or under, and he had an ERA of 209, 295, and his best 166. Now, maybe the hitters more than likely in 82 caught up to his gimmick. Maybe his fastball wasn't as blazing, etc. But all of a sudden, just nothing. You would think that maybe some other team, even a crummy team looking for a reliever, would have just given him a contract and seen what happened. But all of a sudden, he was just out of the game. And of course, what can I say? We got to go to our last guy on this whole thing. I showed you Raleigh Fingers. That A's team, though, they started a tradition on that Father's Day. And it was just tell you one thing, people didn't like Charlie Finley. He had some ideas maybe that were ahead of the game. Do you know that Finley at one point wanted to give all the players a free agent status at the end of the year? And if they were going to eliminate the reserve clause, he just said, let's make them all free agents at the end of the year. And the guy who was upset about that the most was the labor union leader, Marvin Miller, because he said, if you made these guys basically free agents at the end of each year, the salaries would never really increase to the levels that they are now. He wanted just a few guys who were going to, let's say, help certain teams in certain ways be available via free agency each year. Fortunately, the other owners thought that Finley was kind of crazy. And maybe had they listened to him, the salaries wouldn't be obviously as great as they are today. He also wanted to bring in an orange baseball. He was a big proponent of the DH. But here's the guy that really started Howard and I talking about this episode. And it's a guy by the name of Oscar Gamble, one of the great names of all time. And he definitely had some of the best baseball cards of all time. This one, obviously, when he's traded to the Yankees, doing a little research on it, it is cropped, and it is that Yankee hat was really a Indian hat. They did all of the things, fixed it all up. And of course, he never played with that kind of fro for George Steinbrenner. In fact, the irony of it all is Gamble does grow the fro out, and I think it was like 6 inches. So I think he's 5'10", or 6'1", but with the afro, like 6'5", 6'6". I just remember when he was with Cleveland, that when he swung, because the helmet, and of course this was before the ear flap, the helmet, every time he swung and missed, he'd do like a big circle and the helmet would fly off. And then one of two things, if it was kind of like late in the game and he had the helmet on for a little bit, there was indentations in his hair. So it kind of looked just like this without the hat on. And then other times, the hat just wouldn't sit on the afro, and it would be a complete, almost like mushroom shape for his hair. But here's the thing with Gamble. He had some good years. And his best year does come with the White Sox after he goes out of free agency. One thing I remember about Gamble is he signs a contract. I think here's what happened. In 77, I don't believe he's traded by the Yankees because he does play on the 76 team. He hit .232, but he had an on-base percentage of .317 and hit 17 homers for the Yankees because the Yankees were using a two-man system. So they got a lot out of Piniella and Gamble on that team. In fact, let me just give you this. Piniella on that team. Gamble played the majority of the games, 110. Piniella played 100. Together, they were 20 and 90, and basically hit together, probably you would say, probably about 265. And each with a 300 on-base percentage. They also had Carlos May would be the DH, but Piniella would every once in a while play the outfield. So they had a two-man system, platoon out there, and it delivered 20 and 90. Not bad for two players, certainly not Hall of Famers. He goes to the White Sox, really has his best year. It's a walking year. He's going to be a free agent. Bill Veeck doesn't have the money supposedly to sign him, but he goes 31, 83, and 297. He signs with San Diego and only plays there 1 year, but he signed as a free agent, never really stepped up. 747, 7 homers, 47 RBIs, 275 batting average. And he had a long extended contract. And it went on well after he was retired. It was a pretty interesting contract and a smart move by Oscar Gamble, who is the theme, the long hair, for this week's edition of Park Ridge Sports History. Thanks, everyone. This is Will O'Toole. See you next week with another edition. Thank you, Howard, for the idea. Bye now.